في عقد الأشعري وفقه مالك وفي طريقة الجنيد السالك.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Is the audio working? I believe it should be working, inshallah, now. طيب. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. إذن إن شاء الله تعالى, let's begin our session with a brief overview and review of what we studied last class from the meanings of prayer and some of its obligations, quickly listing them. And then today, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we'll be delving into the sunan, the mandubat, and the makruhat, if Allah Azza wa Jal allows for us. Qulu ameen. Ameen. The term salah is said to have the meaning, or go back to the meaning of dua, supplication. And scholars like Qadi Iyadh argued for its existence. Argued that in the Arabic language itself, the term dua and salah, this is well known. The understanding of salah being a dua is well known. And in terms of the Sharia itself, what the Sharia added to salah are specific words and actions, legislatively speaking. The other opinion is that it's derived from the word sila, meaning a connection, meaning that in this action that one does, that there is a connection between the servant and their Lord. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He prescribed the prayer on the night of al-Isra wal Mi'raj, on the night of al-Isra, the Prophet's night journey, which we believe happened physically, not it's a firm belief in our Aqīdah that this literally happened a year before the Hijrah in Mecca. Before that, before al-Isra wal Mi'raj, what was prayer like? Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran, and Mayyara, he explains in his Sharh Dar al-Thameen that the prayer itself was 2 units, rak'atayn in the morning, fil ghadati wal ashi, and 2 in the evening. Fil ghadati wal ashi. There is a discussion on whether the original obligation for both travel and residence was 2 units, with only travel prayer being kept at 2 units while increasing for the number for residence. This is the opinion of Sayyida Aisha radiyallahu anha, and alternatively some scholars, they argue that prayer was originally prescribed as 4 units, then reduced to 2 units for travelers. As supported by the hadith, Allah has lifted from the traveler the obligation of fasting and half of the prayer. And the word lifted, or in this case in the hadith it's wada, here implies the removal of a full obligation. The obligation of the 5 daily prayers, salawat al-khams, is among the essential elements of our deen, and it's known by necessity. Al-ma'lum min ad-din bi-darura. Thus, there's no need for us to go deeply into the proofs of why we have to pray 5 times a day. And whoever denies or harbors any hatred towards these prayers is considered a disbeliever or a kafir, or an apostate, a murtad. And they should be given a chance to repent. They should be given the opportunity to repent. If they do not, they are subject, in our deen. Typically, what happens to a murtad if there is an amir and so on and so forth, they are subject to execution. They are given 3 days. They are given 3 days to repent from their statement, and then they are khalas. This is the hukum on them. Today, functionally speaking, if somebody denies it in the West, here in America, there isn't much you can do. The murtad exists. What in speaking with some of the Western community and scholars, and some of the more reserved scholars, right, in this regard, they said that, subhanallah, if somebody does leave their faith of the community, we push them, we remove them from our masjid events and from our Eid events. They're not allowed to be there. Usually, typically, the family and those around them, they should be maintaining a very minimal contact with that individual. If you had somebody who had leprosy, cancer, COVID-19, we treated with more rigor, right, in terms of isolating people. Like, in the worst of diseases is disbelief and rida, leaving Islam. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Quran, the punishment for leaving Islam is what? Habitat a'maluhu, that all of his actions are erased. All of the good deeds that this person committed, all of the good is gone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this. Say Ameen. As for the one who acknowledges the obligation of prayer but refrains from performing it, there is a debate. Is such a person considered a sinner, a fasiq, who should be executed as a punishment of had, while still inheriting from others if they persist in their refusal? Or is such a person regarded as a disbeliever, a kafir, who should be executed and not inherit nor be preyed upon? Subhanallah, this is what Mayyara brings up in his Sharh, and he says that the first opinion is the prevalent one, while Ibn Habib holds the second view, that the deliberate abandonment of prayer constitutes disbelief. Like, in the majority they say what? That they are a fasiq. That they are a fasiq if somebody leaves off prayer openly. Each opinion is supported by various evidences which are beyond our scope and the scope of the discussion that we have here in the text as well. And so, what we should be looking at prayer, brothers and sisters, is that it is from the most honorable and the greatest of actions that one can do in terms of their dhikr. And through it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gathered all of the children of Adam, has gathered for the children of Adam the actions of all the angels, standing, bowing, ruku'ah or prostration, sujood, and dhikr, and recitation of Quran, and seeking forgiveness and istighfar in it, and sending prayers upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It incorporates essential human deeds such as covering one's awrah with purchased clothing and purifying oneself with water, resembling the practice of zakah. In prayer, yani subhanallah, in salah itself, you see literally every single beneficial action that a human being can do for their Lord. All of it is summarized in salah. This is why salah is so critical. This is why it's so important. This is why it is given this esteem. It's as if the books of fiqh themselves are written for salah. The books of fiqh themselves are written for salah. Min al-ajaib, yani, subhanallah. In prayer, there is a form of abstention from desires, which resembles siyam. Right? We said, what did we say first of zakah? We said zakah was resembled in what? Purifying with water, removing from your body. You're moving from your body what is filthy of your possessions, the najasa and all of the sins that have collected on your body, such as zakah. You're removing the filth of your wealth and giving it out by Allah's command to the poor, so that they may benefit from it, so that there's benefit in it. The second is removing oneself from abstaining oneself from permissible desires, which resembles siyam. The requirement to remain in a specific place parallels i'tikaf. We don't run around in prayer, we stay in one spot, similar to i'tikaf. Turning towards the Kaaba and the Qibla mirrors the pilgrimage of Hajj. Striking against one's lower self and repelling shaitan during prayer resembles jihad. Moreover, the remembrance of Allah, dhikr, and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam resembles the shahadatain, the two declarations of faith, and additionally prayer. Additionally prayer includes elements unique to it, such as the obligation to recite Quran, prostration, and display humility or khushu'. Therefore, it has been said that prayer is to the religion what the head is to the body. Prayer is to the religion what the head is to the body. Ibn Hajar, he quotes one of the scholars who mentioned in his fatawa that the one who neglects prayer is deficient towards all Muslims. For the one praying says, "Oh Allah, forgive me, aghfirli," and the believing men and women, and must say in the tashahhud, "Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi as-salihin." Peace be upon us and upon the righteous servants of Allah. By neglecting prayer, one is falling short in fulfilling their service to Allah, their duty towards the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and their responsibility towards themselves and all Muslimin. This is why the sin of abandoning prayer is so grave. Imam al-Subki rahimahullah deduced from this that there is a right of the servants of Allah, haqqul ibad, within the prayer alongside the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that by abandoning prayer, one fails the entire community of believers, past and future, included in the statement, "Assalamu alayka wa ala assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah as-salihin." Just from this simple statement of the tashahhud. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, he said, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, whoever is negligent in prayer, Allah will punish them with 15 consequences in this world. 15 consequences, 6 in this world, 3 at the time of death, and 3 in the grave, 3 on the day of judgment. How many in total? 16. 15 in total. In terms of the consequences of neglecting the prayer, what are they? The first, Allah removes barakah from their rizq, from their sustenance. This is the first consequence of not praying. The second, Allah removes the blessing from their lifespan, from their hayat, from their lifespan. The third, Allah removes the sima' or the radiance of the righteousness from their face. The fourth is that they will not receive a share in the supplication of the righteous. When the salihin, they say, Allahumma aghfir lana wa li sa'iril muslimin, oh Allah, forgive us and to the rest of the believers, or such as assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah as-salihin. All of this cut off. They're cut off from this dua. The fifth consequence, every good deed they perform will not be rewarded. There will not be a reward for their good deeds. It just gets counted as a deed. That's it, as an action. That's. Allah does not raise their supplication to the heavens. This is the sixth. As for the consequences that affect them at death, They will die in disgrace and thirst. Even if they were given all the water in the world, every ounce of water in the world, their thirst would not be quenched. As for the consequences that affect them in the grave, Allah assigns an angel to disturb them in the grave until the day of judgment. Their grave will be filled with darkness, is the third punishment. And the fourth, their grave will be a place of terror. As for the consequences that will affect them on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigns them an angel that will drag them across the plains of resurrection. They will undergo long and grueling hisab. And the third, Allah will not look at them, nor purify them, nor grant them any mercy, and they will face a painful punishment. The Prophet ﷺ then recited the verse, then there succeeded them a generation who neglected prayer and followed their desires, so they will meet their destruction. Brothers and sisters, never leave off salah. This is how we open our class today. We talked about the benefits of prayer, what it illuminates in the heart, what it connects to what the servant receives from their connection to their Lord. How prayer is the greatest form of ibadah, the greatest form of dhikr, and how it incorporates everything. And then we saw this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, which was narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, of 16 punishments that are given to the one who neglects salah. Be serious about your prayer. Be serious about your ibadah. May Allah Azza wa Jal accept from us. This is the most important thing. I see so many people, they seek so much of this dunya. They ask, how can I get married? How can I find a job? How can I find something in this dunya? Whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, how can I increase in ilm? How can I increase in this? How can I increase in that of the dunya? How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can he help me in what the problems I have? How can he forgive my parents? All of these things that we need, that are part of essential to our lives of progressing and improving and growing. Lakin, when we ask these questions, how many of us directly reflect on the wajib of our life? What is wajib upon us, such as our 5 prayers? How are we dedicating the time to learn our salah, our tahara, our ibadah fully, and practicing it to its fullest extent? How many of us are giving the effort in this regard? Few, right? Few. Allah forgive us, right? May Allah forgive us. Like our objective, brothers and sisters, is to what? Is to first fulfill our obligations, stand on firm ground, and call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we may have what we need of this life. And you will see, as you have just read, that the benefits, what is taken away from the believers, those punishments, the opposite of it is what's given to the ones who pray and worship Allah. Those 16 punishments, go and pray. See that those 16 punishments immediately transform into what? 16 benefits. The opposite of those is what's given to the believers. So they will have radiance on their faces. They will have dua that's supplicated for them. They will have rizq from Allah. They will have barakah in their life. They will have no adab in their graves. On the day of judgment, they will be able to look at Allah Azza wa Jalla. Allah will look at them. Allah will have mercy on them. Allah will enter them into paradise. So this is what we're learning here. We're not just learning sunnah and fard and so forth. We're learning how to enter into Jannah without hisab. We're learning how to live a good life. And that begins with salah and that which is required for it. May Allah Azza wa Jal accept from us our prayers. Make us from as-sajideen. Make us from al-dhakireen. Make us from al-musallin. That we only make sajda to Him. That we only bow and prostrate to Him. That we only make dua to Him. That we never find ourselves astray on any path that takes us away from Him. Allahumma ameen. طيب. Bismillah. Where are the notes here? And then Sayyidina al-Imām Ibn Ashir rahimahullah says, فرائض الصلاة 16 شروطها 4 مقتفرة. He says تكبيرة الإحرام والقيام لها ونية بها ترام فاتحة مع القيام والركوع والرفع منه والسجود بالخضوع ورفع منه والسلام والجلوس له وترتيب أداء في الأسوس نعم. The obligations of prayer are 16. Its conditions are 4 as established. The takbir and standing for it, and intention is required for it. Fatiha while standing, bowing, and rising from it, and prostration with humility. Rising from prostration and the salam, sitting for it, and the order of performance in foundational acts. It would be of great benefit if somebody were to make a poem or a fun rap, maybe a fun rap, a halal rap. Okay, you take Ibn Ashir, you translate it, and then you make it rhyme. Just as they did for the burda, they did like a rhyming burda, right? Like a translation of the burda that rhymes. Likewise, for Ibn Ashir, we should translate this and make it into a rhyme. That way, we have it easy for people to memorize, and then they can pair it along with their study of the text. And we went over the obligations. Of prayer. And we talked about the conditions and obligations of prayer, right? And we said about the conditions, for example, the conditions for salah, شروط الصحة, البلوغ شروط الوجوب such as البلوغ, and شروط الصحة, which includes such as الطهارة and facing the qibla. The obligations of salah, I'm going over. If you need to reference these, go back to the previous class. Okay, we already spoke about them. I'm just reading them over because it's been a bit of a break, and I want for us just to recall some of the headline stuff. Because the objective of today's class is to go over the sunan and the mandubat of the prayer, and if we have time, the makruhat. The obligations of salah are 16. Yes, so we said the niyyah, takbiratul ihram, standing for the takbir. Recitation of al-Fatiha, al-Ruku', wal-Raf' min al-Ruku', wal-Sujud, wal-Raf' min al-Sujud. So we said recitation of al-Fatiha, al-Ruku', rising from Ruku', Sujud, rising from al-Sujud, sitting for the Salam, and then the Salam, and the order of the acts, which is tartib ada' al-Furud, making sure that each action is followed in its prescribed order. And then after that, the Imam also mentions وَالْإِعْتِدَالُ مُطْمَئِنًّا بِالْتِزَامِ تَبْعُ مَأْمُونٌ بِإِحْرَامٍ سَلَامٍ نيته اقتداء كذا الإمام في خوف وجمع جمعة مستخلف. He says of the remaining pillars of Salah, he mentions the i'tidal and the tuma'nina, and following the Imam, or mutaba'atul Imam. This means that one must follow the Imam in takbir and salam. If the follower begins the takbir or salam before their Imam, their prayer is invalid. Then the niyyah of following, or niyyatul iqtida' bil Imam, one must specifically intend to follow the Imam if they're praying in jama'ah. Without this intention, the prayer is invalid, as there's no distinction between the Imam and the follower, the ma'moom. We also mentioned the tuma'nina as well. The tuma'nina, which is the tuma'nina itself is to be still, to have a moment of calmness in prayer. And then he also mentioned the specific intentions that are specific for the Imam in leading the congregation for prayers such as Salat al-Khawf, Salat al-Jam', when they're combining prayers, Salat al-Jumu'ah, Friday prayer, and Salat al-Istiqlaf, where somebody is appointed to replace the Imam. Imam, for example, loses their wudu in prayer, for example, and then he appoints one of the ma'mumeen, the people who are following in prayer, to lead the prayer, to lead the prayer in their place. Overall, if, for example, one starts to pray alone, then finds a congregation, they cannot switch their niyyah to follow the Imam during the prayer, because the intention of following the Imam must be from the beginning of prayer. If someone starts praying in congregation, they cannot switch to praying alone during the prayer, because the niyyah of following binds them to the Imam. It is not valid for someone praying a fard prayer to follow someone praying a nafil prayer, but someone praying a nafil can follow somebody praying a fard. the niyyah of the imam and the follower must match in the type of prayer being performed, whether it is dhuhr, asr, etc., and then whether it is being performed as qada or adah, missed or on time prayer. Let's go down a little bit in the notes. We also mentioned the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha is done, if you recall, without the basmala. We do not say the basmala out loud. You may say it quietly. The mashhūr of the school is that it is not said at all. Like in other scholars with clear proofs have also mentioned its usage, it's it being required from the Surah Al-Fatiha. So mura'atan al-khilaf, one recites it quietly. Right? So if they're praying Maghrib, for example, they don't recite it out loud. They just say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim to the end of the surah. If there are any questions, please put them in the YouTube comments. Ibn Ashir, he then says, شروطها الاستقبال طهر الخبث وستر عورة وطهر الحدث الذكر والقدرة في الغير الآخر تفريع ناسيا وعاجز كثير في غير الأخير، نعم، في غير الأخير تفريع ناسيا وعاجز كثير ندبا يعيدان بوقت كالخطأ في قبلة لا عجزها أو الغطاء وما عدا وجه كفة يجب ستره كما في العورة لكن لدى كشف لصدر أو شعر أو طرف تعيد في الوقت المقر. He says here, amongst its conditions are facing the Qibla, purification from impurities, covering the Awra, and purification from a state of impurity. Then he says these apply to those who remember and are capable, except for the last condition. Rulings apply differently for those who forget or are incapable. It is recommended to repeat the prayer within its time if there is a mistake in facing the Qibla or a failure in covering the Awra. Everything except the face and hands must be covered according to the rules of Awra. He means this specifically for who? For women. So the awra of women are what? The face and hands. The feet must be covered in prayer. So she must wear a long abaya, a long covering. She must not, women should not be praying in pants. Should be praying in abaya. We're not allowed, she's not allowed to show her form. Right? And what you wear in prayer is also what you wear in real life. Right? What you wear in prayer is also what you wear in real life. So what you would wear if you went to a restaurant, for example, should be exactly what you would wear if you were to pray. Meaning that the type of clothing, its width and its flowiness, and its haya or modesty should be that which actually you could pray with without any issue. If you find yourself dressing in something that you say to yourself, I need to put on an abaya or a skirt, then you're wearing the wrong outfit. It's very simple. Likewise for the men, the same thing. If you find yourself wearing tight pants and say to yourself, I need to wear a thobe, you should be wearing something that does not show your form. Right? The awra for women is what? Her face and her hands. Everything except her face and her hands. Meaning that her face and hands can be uncovered. Right? If her face, for example, is beautiful and she is fearful of fitna, she should cover her face. She should cover her face and wear a niqab. If she's in a situation where she does not wish to gain the lust of men looking at her face, she should cover her face. Lakin from her rights is that her face is visible so that she's identified in society. Lakin if she fears that she, for example, is very beautiful and the other men will notice and it will be a source of fitna, khalas, she should cover her face, right, without issue. And the coverings of the face and the rulings of the face in prayer are equal to real life. So whatever we apply in prayer should be applied in real life. Why are we dressing two different ways? Shouldn't be dressing one way for salah and then another way when we go to a wedding or a party or something like that. I understand, like, you might wear like a lesser nice thobe for salah, or more like everyday thobe for salah. And then when you're going to a wedding, you might dress up in a tux or whatnot. Whatever you wear needs to be applicable to prayer. So you should not be wearing tight pants. So when you go, men, and you bend over, your back should not be visible, and we should not be able to see the shape of your hips and thighs and all of these things. La la la. It should be very wide pants. This is why it's disliked to pray in pants for men. It's disliked. Should be in very flowy pants. Very flowy pants, like the old school sirwal. The desis, the shalwar kamis. Yeah, what they wear, the shalwar, that type of pants, that's permissible in prayer. That's the type of pants when the scholars, they say, oh, they can wear pants. That's the pants they're referring to. They're not referring to, the joggers and the jeans that we have today, right? From those pants that we have today, we should be making sure that they're wide enough, that they're not tight on our bodies, right? But of course, the ruling for men is slightly different than for women. Her prayer, her aura is showing, essentially, if she's like that, and it's ma'a dhikri wal qudra, right? The ability and remembering that she should repeat her prayer. Like, and this is critical, guys. This is critical. This is like Islam 101. We need to be dressing modestly, so we should not be going to prayer dressing one way and then leaving prayer and dressing a whole different way. Both should be equal. Both should be equal. I understand you're going to go to a wedding. Your abaya might be a little bit prettier. That's fine. Just make sure that it's like something that you can actually wear to salah, right? If everybody gathered in the wedding and said, okay, everybody, we're going to be praying now, you wouldn't be looking for a head covering and a pants covering and a shirt covering, all khalas, then you're not dressed appropriate. طيب, as Ibn Ashir, Sayyidina al-Imam Ibn Ashir says, وَمَا عَدَى وَجْهُ وَكَفَّهُ يَجِبُ سِتْرُهُ كَمَا فِي الْعَوْرَةِ. He then says, شرط وجوبها النقاء من الدم بقصبة أو الجفوف فاعلمي. And we mentioned this last class, that the condition of its obligation is purity from blood. This is specifically for women. He's talking about the women, these last like 3 or 4 verses, by either a white discharge or dryness. So know this. He means that a woman is not on hayd. If she's on hayd, obviously she cannot perform prayer. She cannot perform prayer. And this is obvious. The hukm of hayd is obvious. From here, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully we'll be able to cover the ahkam in regards to it. For the sake of this class today, we're not going to go into too much detail. We're just going to say that she's not on hayd. That's the condition, right, for her prayer. The next one, for it to be correct. The next one, فَلَا قَضَى أَيَّامُهُ ثُمَّ دُخُولٌ. So no obligation remains for the missed days. So the days that she was on hayd, there's no obligation for her to make those up. وَقْتٍ فَأَدَّهَا بِهِ حَتْمًا أَقُولُ. Once the time begins, perform it without delay, I say. So once the time, and once you're on purity, you pray the immediate prayer. So the conditions for the obligation of prayer are what? That first of all, al-Islam, ثم العقل, ثم البلوغ, so sanity and puberty. Number 4 is what? Purity from menstrual and postpartum blood, and naqa' min ad-dam wal-hayd. This is what we mentioned. And number 5 is the entry, dukhul al-waqt, entry for prayer. Because how can you pray Salat al-Dhuhr and it's still Fajr, right? So from the conditions of its obligation, shurut al-wujub, is that the time of prayer has to enter in. In addition to that, Qadi Iyadh, for example, he adds the condition that the arrival of da'wah comes for non-Muslims. right? Because we still believe that non-Muslims are obligated to pray, that every human being is obligated to pray, right? So long as what? That dawah has been received to them. They've rejected Islam. Khalas, they're still obligated. So what of the times of prayer? I believe we missed this section from last class. So we'll go over the times of prayer briefly, inshallah. The time of prayer is divided into two. We have something called waqt al-ikhtiyari, and then we have something called waqt al-daruri. Waqt al-ikhtiyari ثم وقت الضروري. وقت الاختياري is the first period in which one has a choice when to pray. The second is waqt al-daruri, in which one has no choice and must pray as soon as possible. For waqt al-ikhtiyari, if one discovered that he has prayed before this period, it must be redone immediately. It is forbidden to delay it beyond the ikhtiyari time without a valid pretext. For example, like being asleep, being unconscious, possibly being unable to pray for whatever reason. That is slightly beyond your control. The second, waqt al-daruri, which we mentioned, this time period, once it enters, the other conditions are fulfilled, one must pray immediately, such as making wudu, covering the awrah, removing the impurities, and facing the qibla. The period for subh prayer, for the Malikis, we do not call fajr, we call fajr subh, and we call the two rak'at sunnah before subh prayer fajr. The obligatory prayer is referred to as what? As subh. So when we're for subh prayer, the waqt al-ikhtiyari, or the first period, lasts from true dawn, a fajr al-sadiq, which is not the first light in the sky, but rather a thin line of light along the horizon that follows it, until the moment the disk of the sun emerges above the horizon, just slightly. This is called shuruq. For dhuhr, dhuhr is the first prayer that was commanded in Islam. The two periods for dhuhr are when the sun reaches the zenith until Asr begins. This is the ikhtiyari time. The second is from Asr time until Maghrib gets close. Which is about the amount of time for you to completely pray dhuhr and one rak'ah of Asr. So if that's going to take you like maybe 6 minutes, right? Possibly. Whatever amount of time that it would take you to do that before Maghrib prayer. That's when the time for dhuhr ends. For Asr, the two periods are when an object's shadow equals its height plus the length of its shadow at the zenith, and it continues until the sunlight is reflected on walls and turns yellowish. Isfirar al-shams, the sun turns yellow. So, like for example, from the with this like object that I have here, you're looking at the full length. If it gets to the full length of its shadow, Asr time has come in, and then you go all the way until you see Isfirar al-shams, right? And you go like, okay, Maghrib time is entering. That's when you start to do what? That's when that's when the daruri time comes in, and you have to pray as soon as possible. The two periods for Maghrib are: the ikhtiyari time is when the disk of the sun disappears behind the horizon, or ghurub, which is sunset, until the conditions of praying are fulfilled. Does that make sense? Some say that that it's all daruri time. A lot of the scholars, they say it's all daruri time. So the Maghrib, you don't wait for it. You pray it immediately. As soon as the time for Maghrib comes in, one is obligated to pray it. One is obligated to pray it as soon as the time comes in. طيب. The two periods for Isha, they are when the red and yellow of twilight disappear, which is the shafaq, from the sky, although there's some light that may remain until the first third of the night has passed. So we should note that the night itself starts at Maghrib. So a third of the night has passed. And from then until Fajr comes close. That's the daruri time. If we are taking the example of a masjid, the masjid always must pray on time. They cannot delay prayer. They cannot delay prayer unless if there is like some extraordinary need. Like in the mosque, the adhan and salah must always be at the beginning of time. Essentially, the salah times rely on what? Observation. If the signs are invisible, such as in cities with excessive illumination at night, and that prevents seeing the dawn, or in cloudy weather, for example, it is acceptable to follow. Some scholars say it's acceptable to follow some sort of astronomical calculation for it. However, the time of Fajr al-Sadiq and the beginning of Isha can never be accurately calculated. Overall, one of the things that we must do as a Muslim community is begin to revive the tradition of having people who are trained in knowing the times of prayer and calculating these times of prayer based off of these observations that are made daily. And in many of the old masajid, particularly in the Maghrib, you will see in the middle of the sahan, in the middle of the courtyard, a strange looking mimbar or table or some structure with a sundial and different objects that are on the sundial. That used to be for calculation of the time of prayer. And this is a tradition that actually is essential for the Muslim community. So far in this day and age, what we've done is automated all of our prayer times to some sort of astronomical calculation that could potentially be problematic if we're really going to be honest, especially for things such as siyam, fasting. This is why the scholars, they said, we should have people who are calculating the time physically and doing the observations. Lakin, with the astronomical calculations in place, the practice that we should have as an ummah is that we should possibly wait a minute or two after that calculation comes in, just like a minute or two, until we and observe it for ourselves and see if the signs are there for us to actually pray Maghrib, Isha, Dhuhr, Asr, and Fajr or Subh. With that being said, the author now goes into the Sunan Mu'akkada. The Sunan Mu'akkada of Salah. A Sunnah Mu'akkada, as we talked about way before, is the confirmed Sunnah. There are 22 Sunan of Salah in total. The first 10 are Mu'akkada for the person praying alone and the Imam. Failing to perform them demands prostrations of what? Sahu, of forgetfulness. And we'll talk about this inshallah. هيا نبدأ. سيدنا الإمام ابن عاشر يقول: سننها السورة بعد الوافية مع القيام أولا والثانية. يا سلام. الوافية, what is الوافية? سورة الفاتحة. Surah al-Fatiha. Surah al-Fatiha has many names. One of them is al-Wafiyah. He says the sunnah is the recitation after al-Wafiyah, Surah al-Fatiha, standing in the first and second rak'ah. He then says jahrun wa sirrun. What is that? بمحل لهما. Sorry, this word is cut off for me. تكبيره إلا الذي تقدمه. I need to see the text. I have a copy in front of me and not the text. Subhanallah. Let me just make sure of this word. My apologies. We want to make sure that we're reading correctly. We don't just want to have, We don't want to just be joking around. We want to make sure that we're reading the matn word for word, letter for letter. This is a tradition of our teachers. Huh? نعم. جهر وسر يمحل لهما تكبيره إلا الذي تقدم كل تشهد جلوس أول والثاني لا ما للسلام يحصل وسمع الله لمن حمده في الرفع من ركوعه أورده. جميل. نرجع للمتن. We go back to the matn. And we see here, first of all, Sayyidina al-Imam Ibn Ashir rahimahullah refers to Surah al-Fatiha as al-Wāfiyah, which is an obligation, which is which is an obligation, reciting Surah al-Fatiha. After reciting it, it is a sunnah for the Imam and the wal-fadh, the one who's praying alone, to recite another surah in the first 2 rak'ahs of prayer. The follower, the ma'mum, in any loud prayer, al-jahr, should listen to that recitation, and while in silent prayers, it is recommended to recite something after al-Fatiha. It is recommended for them. The Prophet ﷺ taught this, that it is not obligatory to recite a specific surah, yani it's a sunnah mu'akkada, nor to complete a whole surah. The main point is that something from the Quran is recited after al-Fatiha. Nafi' narrated from Ibn Umar, which goes through who? Malik, the golden chain. And he said, كان يقرأ بسورتين والثلاث في ركعة. He used to recite 2 or 3 surahs in 1 rak'ah. Right? After that, the next one is standing for recitation. So both the Imam and the fadh are required to stand for the recitation of the surah in the first and second rak'ahs. The ma'mum must follow the Imam in these actions as well. The ma'mum is always following the Imam. They're not acting alone. Number 3 is reciting loud, al-jahr, and silent, sir recitations. So in prayers such as al-maghrib, wal-isha'i, wal-fajr, the recitation in the first 2 rak'ahs is done aloud by the Imam, while the last rak'ahs of these prayers and the entire dhuhr and asr prayers are recited silently. In al-talqeen, it is mentioned الجهر بالقراءة في موضعه الجهر والإصرار بها في موضع الإصرار سنتان. That reciting aloud in its place and reciting silently in its place are both sunan. Number 4, يعني the Imam al-Maziri, he wrote the famous Sharh of al-Talqeen, and it's like just a brilliant text. It's a lot of like Q&A and different case studies. It's like an incredible book. Sharh al-Talqeen, Imam al-Maziri, rahimahullah. And Imam al-Maziri, he's buried in Sahel in Tunisia. He's originally from Kulliyah, and then he moved through his time to the Sahel. He's from one of the greatest scholars of this ummah. He's one of the greatest fuqaha of the school of Imam Malik, and he's an authority in the school of Imam Malik. يعني alhamdulillah, he's not far from my family's village in Tunisia, so we often try to make the visit and read Fatiha on his maqam, and يعني we seek the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to the scholars. We seek them for us so that we may enter into paradise. Allahumma ameen. Number 4, which is actually, let me go back a step. So let me explain the jahr and the sir in a little bit more detail. So for Maghrib, Isha, and Subh prayers, as we know, they are prayers that are recited out loud. There are different rulings depending on the gender for the type of recitation one should make. So for the men, because for example, one may ask, how loud can I get, or how low of a volume can I recite at? The minimum volume for a man when he's reciting in a salah out loud, for the out loud raka'at, for the out loud units of the prayer, for the prayers that we described, the three, Maghrib, Isha, and Subh, the minimum volume is that the reciter and whoever is next to him can hear the recitation. However, for the maximum volume, there's no limit. One should not disturb other people when they're praying, lekin there is no limit. For a woman, the maximum volume is that the reciter, she could only hear herself, but not the person next to her. So she can recite for herself, but not the person next to her. Obviously, there is no like jama'ah for women. They don't pray in jama'ah. There's no like a women's only jama'ah in a masjid. That doesn't exist for Malikis, right? You have to go to another madhab for that, right? But a Maliki masjid, there's none of that, right? But she may, like for example, be praying at home alone. The best of prayer for a woman is in her home, as Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha said, right? And if she's in the masjid, the best of rows for her is the back. Always the obligation here is what? Is modesty. The goal here is modesty and protecting the hayat of our community, right? So for the women, the maximum volume is what? Is that she recites loud enough for herself. The minimum for her is just the movement of the tongue, which we'll get to in a moment. Reciting silently for the prayers such as Dhuhr, Asr, right? Or the last raka'at of Maghrib and Isha. For the men, the minimum is moving the tongue without sound. What does that mean? So you would, for example, say, Allahu Akbar. That's it. That's enough to recite Surah Al-Fatiha that your tongue is moving. The maximum for a sir is that he can hear himself. The person next to him should not hear him. He can hear himself. So he would say, Allahu Akbar. Hakada. Okay? For women, there's no loud. It's just movement of the tongue. There's no difference in her recitation. So when she's reciting out loud, it's enough for her and it's enough for her to hear herself. When she's reciting in the sir prayers, in Dhuhr, Asr, in the last two of Maghrib and Isha, how is she reciting? In the last one of Maghrib and the last two of Isha, how is she reciting? She's reciting with just the movement of her tongue. Bas. The next is saying all other takbirs apart from takbirat al-ihram, which is obligatory, right? And we call this takbirat al-intiqal, yani the takbirat of movement. Ibn Ashir, he says, jahrun wa sirrun يمحل لهما تكبيرة إلا الذي تقدمت. So here تكبيرة إلا الذي تقدم is تكبيرة الانتقال. تكبيرات الانتقال. The next one is saying the first tashahhud. After that, number 7 is saying the second tashahhud. Number 8 is sitting for the first tashahhud. Number 9 is sitting during the second tashahhud. Number 10 is rising from the ruku'ah while saying Sami'a Allahu liman hamidah. Sami'a Allahu liman hamidah. And the ma'moom, he would say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Lakin the imam, he does not say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. All he says is Sami'a Allahu liman hamidah. The ma'moom, when they say Rabbana wa lakal hamd, they say it quietly. They do not say it out loud. They say it quiet. They say Bas. They don't say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. La. When the imam is reciting Surah Al-Fatiha as well, right? And he says وَلَا we do not say Ameen out loud. La. We say Ameen quietly to ourselves. Because all of that is extra from prayer. The ma'moom doesn't do extra from the prayer. All of these actions are extra from the prayer. That loud sound, we consider it to be extra. So it's quiet. Khalas. You say it to yourself. Movement of the tongue. Bas. What we mentioned here now, from these 10 are what is considered sunnah mu'akkada. If these are missed in the prayer, they require the sujood as-sahu, which we haven't covered just yet, and we'll cover in the future, inshallah. We'll be covering it in the future. because sujood al-sahw itself is its own bab and discussion and topic, and requires like a whole like chart for us to like figure this out, and to apply it correctly. Like for somebody to lead prayers, I need them to know. We need them to know sahw. Sahw is very important, because when things go wrong in prayer, you have to be very, very aware. It happens. Things go wrong all the time. People miss stuff. Imams make mistakes all the time. You're a human, right? But how are you going to correct those mistakes and ensure the prayer is correct for the musallis behind you, right? For the ma'moom behind you, ma'moomeen. The next is the sunan, or the sunan al-khafifa. And these are sunnah acts that don't necessarily require sujood al-sahw, but they're still recommended to enhance one's prayer. Leaving them undone does not demand any sahw for it, as we have just mentioned. This includes, as Ibn Ashir rahimahullah says, وَالْبَاقِي كَالْمَنْدُوبِ فِي الْحُكْمِ بَدَى إقامة سجوده على اليدين وطرف الرجلين مثل الركبتين إنصات مقتد بجهر ثم رده على الإمام واليسار وأحد به وزائد سكون للحضور سترة غير مقتد خاف المرور جهر السلام كلما التشهد وأن يصلي على محمد اللهم صل على محمد. Then what he says, and the rest are similar to mandub in the rulings, meaning that they do not require, that they do not require the sujood al-sahw, as we mentioned. The next, he says, the placement of the hands, the feet in prostration. The placement of the hands, the feet in prostration, is like that of the knees. Silence of the follower in a loud prayer, and the return of the salam to the imam to the left. Increased stillness for the presence of the heart. The sutra of one praying alone, fearing passage in front. The loud saying of salam, the words of tashahhud, and sending blessings upon Muhammad. Now let's break these down, inshallah. Number one, let's begin with the iqamah. The first is the iqamah. The call to commence, or the iqamah, which is between the adhan and the salah. Even if making up salah, for men it is allowed for every obligatory salah, even if praying alone. Allowed, not allowed. Allowed, meaning out loud. It is recommended for women praying alone to do it silently. Silently. Always. For women, always quiet. Always quiet. Not allowed. Quiet. For the men, it's always there's always that added obligation sometimes with things being out loud. So make sure that you're able to differentiate between the two. So the way we do iqamah is slightly different than the other madhahib. We say, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Hayya ala salati, Hayya ala al-falahi, Qad qamat as-salah. One time, Qad qamat as-salah. Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. There is no Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la, no added like tone or melody to your voice. The adhan in the Mālikī school is literally just reading the words out loud. Literally. What you want is just to be audible. People can hear you as a man. You're making the mu'adhin, you're the mu'adhin, and you're doing the iqamah, should be just be loud and brief. Why? Because the time for prayer is in, and you taking a long time for the adhan, you taking a long time for the iqamah, this is getting in the way of the time of prayer. And in instances like Salatul Maghrib, this can be problematic. Right? Because the time of Maghrib is so tight. And if we're taking 4 minutes for you to complete the adhan, what is this? Right? This is like a bid'ah. It's kind of like from our perspective, this is like, I don't mean to say bid'ah, and I don't want to go into that ruling, but it's like an added thing that didn't exist. It didn't exist. Right? So from our end, what do we require, brothers and sisters? We require that the adhan and the iqamah are done simply. We'll talk about the adhan in a bit, inshallah. Like, we'll begin here by mentioning what the iqamah. Why? Because the iqamah is part of your salah directly. And here the imam, he mentions it. Number two, during prostrating, the following parts of the body should be touching the ground. So the hands the hands, both palms of the hands. And the hands, they should be what? They should be adjacent to the ears. Right? They should not be up here. They should not be out here. They should be adjacent to the ears. So when you're making sujood, you're making sajda, they should be adjacent to your ears. Right? When you're on the ground. The forearms should be above the ground. They should not be touching the ground. Men should keep their elbows away from their sides. However, for women, they should keep them at their sides. تَضُمُّ جَسَدِهَا. She should cover her body. Okay? She should cover her body. So when she's making sujood, she shouldn't be stretching out her body so that her figure is visible. She should be tucking in her elbows and putting her hands at her sides and minimizing how much space her body is exposed, how exposed her body is. The toes, they should remain facing towards the qibla. The knees, they should be that the thighs and belly are separate for men but close for women. What does that mean? That means when you're sitting down, for men, the position of your hips, thighs, and knees, they should be out. Your belly shouldn't be tucked onto your thigh, and you should be like squished up when you're making sujood. No, that's the women, not the men. The men should be stretched out a little bit so that you can actually see like an angle that's forming, right? Maybe like let's say like it's like a 45-degree angle, right? From your knees should be straight up from the ground, and then your back should be going down like that at a 45-degree angle, and your arms should be, your hands at the hand placement as we mentioned, and your elbows should just be out from your body, not all the way out 90 degrees, right? Or 180 degrees. It should be just in the middle, always 45 degrees. Okay? For the woman, it's different. For the woman, she's closing her elbows into her body. She's pushing her stomach against her thighs so that she's all covered and she's all squished. Why? So her body isn't exposed. Her body isn't exposed. Why? Because this is what Allah wants. Allah doesn't want you to be exposed. You pray how Allah wants you to pray. You don't pray how society tells you to pray. There's no feminism in salah. There's no feminism in salah. What women do is not what men do in salah. What women do and men do in salah is what's commanded by Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't change things for that. We don't put things here and there. We don't say women come and lead the prayer. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli." We prayed just as he prayed. Right? So what do we say of the women? We look at how the Sahabiyat were praying, and this is how they were praying. May Allah Azza wa Jal bring us closer to Him. Ameen. The follower is silent and listens to the Imam when he recites out loud, whether he can hear him or not, whether he can understand him or not. He doesn't say a single thing. Doesn't recite a single thing, just listens. Bas. If the follower returns the salam to the Imam, turning his head to the front, even if he joined to pray one rak'ah, what is that? So when the Imam says, and he finishes the prayer, and he says, Assalamu alaikum. Remember, the Imam, he's not going Assalamu alaikum and turning all the way. He turns just a little bit. Assalamu alaikum. Once he finished the kum, alaikum, that's it. That's where his head stops. Just a little bit movement. That's it. For the followers of the salah, when they hear the Imam say Assalamu alaikum, what do? They turn to their right. They say Assalamu alaikum. Why? Because there's somebody on their right. Then what do? They return the salam. So they say Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. So the second and third are mandub. The first taslim is required to exit the prayer. The second and third, what is it? What are they? They are from the sunnah al-khafifa from the salah. The first is what? The first is required. Bas. That's the ruling. The 15th point here is that the follower only returns the salam to the left if somebody is there. Right? This is the added step. So as we mentioned, he says salam once to the right, salam to the Imam. If somebody's on his left, he says assalamu alaikum. Bas. If there's nobody there, then he just salamu alaikum, bas, and he exits the prayer. Number 16, pausing for more than the minimum stillness required in each position. What does that mean? So for example, if you're in sujood and the minimum stillness is like a second, for all of the bones and your body limbs to have a moment of stillness. If you pause for a little bit longer than that, that is from the sunan of the prayer. So if you pause for like 10 seconds as opposed to 5 seconds, that's from the sunan of the prayer. Number 17 is setting up a sutra if the imam or person praying alone believes people may pass through an area of sujood. The sutra is any object or creature, but must be ritually clean, immobile, have the minimum thickness of a spear, be at least a cubit long, yani the length of a forearm, and should not distract the person praying. Okay, so you can put like your bag, you can put a chair, you can put like one of the Quran holders in front of you. The masjid themselves, the masajid should have these kind of sutras around. So things that you can prevent people from crossing in front of you as you're praying, especially for Malikis in a masjid. Why? Because the Mālikī, as we'll get to in a moment, they pray with their hands at their sides. And this sometimes for some people when they're walking by, comically maybe, they think you're just standing there looking ahead into nothing, right? They think you're just like phasing out. So having a sutra in front of you prevents people from actually crossing in your way. They might not be aware that you're praying. 18, for everybody to say the first salam out loud to end the salah. All the other salams should be said silently. The imam must keep his salam short. If the imam lengthens the initial takbirat al-ihram or the final salam, he could make the follower start before him or finish before him, and that will invalidate the follower's salah. Therefore, the imam must always shorten the initial takbir and the final salam. What does that mean? From the signs of an imam who is trained in the Mālikī Madhab, two of them are what? That he says, that he goes, when he begins the prayer, he says, Allahu Akbar. Done. Doesn't say, Allahu Akbar. La, not allowed. Just Allahu Akbar. When he exits the prayer, it should be Assalamu alaikum. Not Assalamu alaikum. La. Why? Because somebody, as we just mentioned, they may say Assalamu alaikum thinking that they're following the imam, and they get confused and they exit the prayer. It causes for them to lose their prayer. Due to what? Due to you extending the taslim or extending the takbirat al-ihram. Therefore, as an imam, you should be conscious. Quick taslim, quick takbir. Number 19. That the wording of the tashahhud is what Malik reported from Umar ibn al-Khattab in the Muwatta, where he says, radiyallahu anhu, التحيات لله الزاكيات لله الطيبات الطيبات he says التحيات لله الزاكيات لله الطيبات الصلوات لله السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Then number 20 is the salah upon the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam after the last tashahhud, which is recited Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. Can you recite in a different way? Absolutely no problem. There are many riwayat for the tashahhud and the salah al-Ibrahimiyya. They're all valid. Okay? Number 21, which is to call the adhan for the 5 salah, for the 5 prayers, if a group expects the general public to join. What does this mean? Such as being in an open field where it's usual for people to gather for salah, or a masjid. The wording of the adhan is the following. And we're special and munfarid in how this adhan is done. And maybe we can, if we have time, we'll share the story of the Hanafis trying to laugh at us and then us proving them wrong. Lakin from what was recited in Medina, this adhan comes from Ibn Maktoum, comes from Amal of Ahl al-Madinah, comes from what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught the companions directly, which is to say, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. And in Salat al-Subh only, one would say الصلاة خير من النوم الصلاة خير من النوم. But for the other prayers, they would just continue and finish with Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. This is the adhan according to the fiqh of Imam Malik and the actions of the Ahl al-Madinah, the scholars of Medina. The other madahib have different ways to recite the adhan. And from the years during the time of Imam Malik, I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe it's Qadi Abu Yusuf who comes down and makes Umrah and then Hajj, and he comes and he visits Medina for ziyarah, and he visits Malik, and he hears the adhan being called in Medina, and he begins to scold the mu'adhan, or scold the adhan and say that the Prophet never did this. What kind of adhan is this? And so I believe it was Imam Malik who was in this conversation. Lakin yani, forgive me if I'm incorrect. Lakin the benefit of the story is there, which is that the scholar goes and he calls the mu'adhan. He tells him, "Come over here. Who are you?" "I'm son of so and so." "And who are you? And who did you learn the adhan from?" "My father." "And who was your father?" "So and so." "Who was your father?" "So and so." "And who taught him?" "So and so." "Who taught him?" Right? He went back like 3 generations. He says, "Who taught him? Who taught him? Who taught him?" And he says, "Ibn Maktoum, the mu'adhan of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So he looked at Qadi Abu Yusuf and he says, "This is the adhan." Qadi Abu Yusuf changed his opinion and he says, "Khalas, this is the adhan of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So even yani, Qadi Abu Yusuf and the likes of him and the greatness of him as a scholar and of the Hanafi school, even when he was exposed or given the direct understanding of where this adhan came from, he could not deny the usul of Malik. Rahmatullahi alayhim ajma'een. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon them, upon our ummah, and upon our scholars. We love the 4 madhahib. It's the sign from the signs of loving the 4 madhahib is loving Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and being upon correct aqeedah and iman. May Allah azza wa jal protect that for us. Ameen. Number 22 is to shorten the salah if traveling, which makes permissible shortening dhuhr, asr, and isha down to their first 2 rak'ahs, once past the outskirts of one's hometown until returning to its outskirts on the way back. So one would have to travel approximately, yani, if your travel is approximately 48 miles, about 48 miles. And a lot of the scholars, they had different opinions. I know some of the scholars in the school of Malik today, they say around 36 miles. Like in the majority of scholars and even with other madhahib, it's around 48 miles. So a 48-mile distance that you're making, right, from your home, as soon as you leave the outskirts of your town, you can begin to shorten the prayer. You can begin to shorten the prayer. So shortening the prayer along your travel route, shortening the prayer is from the sunan to do. So you would shorten dhuhr, asr, and isha to 2 rak'at. Lakin maghrib is not shortened, it stays as 3. Fajr, it stays as 2. There's no shortening Fajr. You also have the right to join 2 consecutive salahs on way or en route during your travel, while traveling. So for example, you're going from, in the US for example, from New York City to Los Angeles. As you are driving through the states, you may pray and join, pray 2 rak'at and join your prayers as you are in transit. Shortening and joining Any questions? Bismillah. Let me try to open up the YouTube so I can see. I don't know if the brothers from the admin are around, but if you could also send me whatever's being asked. I have to a lot of pages I gotta go through. All right, here we go. There we are. Bismillah. All right, looking through the questions that we have here. The sound stopped working. Did the sound stop working again? If so, remind me from where we left off or the last thing that you heard. And I'll try to go back and review that because we did go over a fair amount. The last thing that was said is about the 48 or 36 miles somewhere. Okay. Let's just go over shortening the prayer once more. Bi'idhnillah, okay. So to shorten the salah is from the sunnahs of prayer. This is done for the one who is traveling. The one who is traveling, it's permissible for them to shorten Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha to 2 rak'at. Maghrib and Fajr are not shortened. Why? Because they're not 4 rak'ahs prayer, 4 rak'ah prayers. They're not ruba'iyah. What are they? The thulathiyah and subh prayer is 2 prayers, is 2 rak'at. Therefore, we don't shorten those prayers. As for the 4 prayers, the 4 unit prayers, Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha, they get to go down to 2 rak'ahs once you pass the outskirts of your town. So, for example, you would look at the border, like in New Jersey, for example. The issue is that we have town after town after town after town, right? And there isn't like a clear border line. It almost feels as if like the towns are blending into each other. And so when I asked my teacher Shaykh Maḥmoud about this, he mentioned that it would just be whatever is considered like on the map a border for it, right? It wouldn't be like, for example, trees and a distance and then another town. We don't really have that in New Jersey, but there are other parts in the United States of America that do have that. So it's easier to consider what is the limit of your town. Other scholars who are from here, they mentioned that one would simply just consider like an industrial area in their town, and that's what would suffice, right? Those outskirts of town usually has like some industrial areas, some warehouses, a river, possibly something that would be a physical barrier that would show you the border of your town. So the ruling is that if you leave the border of your town as a traveler, you can now begin to shorten your prayers. You can also combine your prayers so long as you're en route to your destination. So if you're traveling from New York City to Los Angeles, this is a great distance. So it's more likely than not you're going to make stops. On those stops, you can shorten and combine so long as you are not staying for a period of 20 obligatory salahs or more in that area. Okay? In that capacity as well, one has this. So for the distance that one must travel, it should be 48 miles. 48 miles. I have heard scholars say 36. Most people are of the opinion that I know of, including like Dr. Shadee and a lot of the Malikis here in America. When they apply this, it's 48 miles, which is about 77 kilometers, just over 77 and a quarter kilometers. So, alhamdulillah, this is for traveling. Bi-idhnillah ta'ala, what we'll do next class is we'll come back over this and we'll try to give you guys like a week to review everything, right? We'll try to review the prayers, and inshallah ta'ala see what I always try to do is like I go over the class and see if there were any mistakes or misquotes or something like that, and I try to make sure that in the review that there is some correction, like inshallah ta'ala, hopefully there isn't any issues. But if there are, please let me know, and no problem. I see here from the comments, alhamdulillah, we had an engaging class. um, the guiding helper is a rhymed translation of Ibn Ashir. The footnotes in the main text have been criticized for having weak positions. It's available online in the PDF. I haven't read it. I'll look at it, inshallah. We could probably look at that and see how that benefits, if it's of benefit, inshallah ta'ala. I think for the sake of our class, what we want to make sure is we get the fundamental understanding. For Ibn Ashir, if you memorize it, it's excellent, right? For like your regular average Muslim, memorizing a poem, or maybe breaking it off into sections. So you memorize like the salah part, you memorize the Aqīdah part, in sections, so that it's easier for you, depending on what you want to focus on mastering or understanding for that period, right? That would be helpful as well. In this class, we also mentioned how to give adhan, talked about the sunnah of adhan, and we said that it's specific for congregational prayers where you're expecting people to come and join you, not just like on your own. You can give it on your own, but it's typically for when you have, when you're in an area where, for example, you're expecting people to come pray dhuhr with you or asr or whatever it is. You're out in the park, for example, you have a barbecue, and it's like a lot of Muslims are out there, and there, so you're going to give adhan. Or maybe it's the masjid for obvious reasons. Likewise, for the iqama, we talked about this. And we also mentioned the benefits of prayer, the issues that could face somebody who leaves off prayer, the hukm for the one who leaves off prayer, the hukm for the one who, or not the hukm, but the benefits for the one who does their prayer, and so forth. I have a question here. If we haven't finished memorizing the Quran, should we memorize mutun? Both go hand in hand. A matn is fard ayn. Matn is fard ayn. You're obligated to know fard ayn. You're not obligated to memorize the entire Quran, but you're obligated to know fard ayn. So if the matn is helping you memorize fard ayn, that's what you memorize, right? For the Quran, your goal should, as a talib ilm, your goal should be memorizing the full Quran. For the awam, for people, memorize as much as the Quran as you possibly can. Like, what's the point that you memorize the whole Quran and you don't know how to pray? Like, what was the point then, right? So obviously, what we're trying to say here is that one should know their fard ayn, what is ma'loom min ad-din bi-darura. They should know these matters. They should know matters of their aqīdah and so on. And memorizing the Quran, this can be done alongside it. I don't think it's something that would prevent you. I think this is a good place for us to stop for today, inshallah. Next class, we're going to be going over mandubat as-salah. We're also going to be going over makruhat as-salah. So the beneficial actions of prayer, the meritorious actions of prayer, and the disliked actions of prayer. And then if we have time after that, we'll be going into the different types of the extra additional chapters in regards to prayer that come afterwards. بارك الله فيكم وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وإلى لقاء آخر إن شاء الله تعالى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.